All right, good morning, everybody. It is May 10th, 2022, and this is the Law and Policy Committee meeting of the California Fair.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Chair Matich?
Here. Item 1, public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any? Seeing none, we'll proceed to item 2, approval of the April 12th, 2022 committee minutes. Commissioner Baker, any edits or comments on the minutes?
No, thank you. I move to approve.
All right, I will second. Any public item 2?
Commissioner Baker?
Here. Aye.
Chair Matich?
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right, we'll now proceed to item 3. This is our legislative update, and with that, we have our senior FPPC Legislative Counsel. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Matich and Commissioner Baker. So the Commission-sponsored bills continue to move through the legislative process. Our bills that have costs are on suspense in the Appropriations Committee, and we'll have more information on how the committee will decide about those bills in a couple weeks. In the legislation report for this month, I've included the FPPC's projected costs for all Commission-related bills. These figures were calculated with input from all of the divisions to ensure that any increases to workload would be accounted for. Also in this report are staff's recommended positions for other Commission-related bills, that is, recommendations for potential formal support of other bills. These recommendations are based generally on staff's determination of whether the bill furthers the purposes of the Act, whether we think this is good policy, and also on Commission input that we've heard throughout the year. I'll first give some updates on Commission-sponsored bills, the ones that we are currently sponsoring, our priority legislation. AB 2172 by Assemblymember Cervantes relating to paper filing with the SOS has some updates for that one. I had reported in previous meetings that staff was in the process of talking to SOS and gathering information about the limitations of their current electronic filing system, CalAccess, and how that could impact the goals of this bill to eliminate paper filing and instead rely solely on the filings of CalAccess. After those conversations and after receiving a lot of information from SOS, we learned that the forms on CalAccess cannot be updated or changed, meaning that in some cases the forms on CalAccess are not identical to the up-to-date forms that have been approved by the Commission. After analysis from our legal division, we determined that it would not be acceptable for the official filing to be on an out-of-date form. So we are moving forward with amendments that would allow folks to, instead of filing on paper, to file by email with the Secretary of State's office using a digital signature. This would still eliminate some of the burdens of the existing law that requires them to file on paper with handwritten signatures. And this would also ensure that the official filing for audit and other legal purposes is on the up-to-date form, and this also ensures that we retain full and consistent disclosure. We do have costs for this bill. It will require one new position in the legal division. We'll move on to the next, SB 921 by Senator Newman relating to the Data Act. This bill is on consent in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Our costs for this one include one-year limited term position to build the technical infrastructure and a second IT position for maintaining those, that information and those records on our website. The next is SB 1483 by Senator Glazer relating to the Political Reform Education Program. That bill is also on suspense in the Appropriations Committee, and our costs include the annual contract amount for the Blackboard education software and 3 new positions. I'll move on now to other Commission-related bills, although I can pause here if there's any questions about our sponsored legislation.
I have one, this is a bit for the public, but certainly for me as well. Going back to the legislation, Assemblymember Cervantes Bill, AB 2172, you'd mentioned that there are forms on CalAccess that are out of date and cannot be changed. I just want to be clear, we provide all the forms nice and up-to-date for people to file. If we're going to do this by amendment, where does that leave someone if they, under this bill, if there's an out-of-date form on Cal Access, would they not use that at all? Or I imagine that's part of the whole continuing progress to get Cal Access changed over. Just want to be clear on what are the options for someone if there's an out-of-date form in one place and we're providing others. I want to make sure that that's pretty clear out in the public record.
This would apply in the interim before the new system is updated. After that, it'll switch completely over to CARS. But before that time, they'll file on Cal Access and also file, currently they're required to file on paper, and that paper form is the up-to-date form, and that's the official form for audit and other legal purposes. So this bill would let them file that official form, the up-to-date form, by email instead. So everything else remains the same. The information on Cal Access, while not on the up-to-date form, is in some cases not identical to what is on the current form, but because we have this dual filing, we do have the full information using both.
And so my understanding is under this bill, the correct forms will be filed, and the electronic version will be the email, basically. What would the public then be able to access? How would they be able to get access to the emailed form so they're seeing the most what's been filed that way? And again, this is a Cal Access issue, less what's happening on our end, but I'm trying to imagine when this bill comes forward and perhaps is signed by the governor, what is the public going to be able to see?
I'm not entirely sure of the process for how currently people can access the paper copies. I'm not sure if it's a public records request or if they can just make a less formal request with the Secretary of State's office, but I imagine it's some sort of request with their office.
Okay. Not with us. Thank you.
Okay, for these bills, these other commission-related bills, I will go over updates, costs, and our recommended positions. The committee may choose to vote on whether to recommend to the full commission next week that the commission take a particular position on each of these bills. And if you choose to do so, I will share those recommendations with the commission next week. My plan is to go through all of them, and then at the end, if you'd like to take one out to speak more about the position, you can request to do so. Otherwise, possibly you may vote on all of them at once, but we'll see what happens. First is AB 975 by Assemblymember Rivas. The bill was amended May 5th. This bill relates to electronic filing for SEIs and extending the time that a public official has to make reimbursement for gift of admission to invitation-only events. The amendments make two main substantive changes. The first change is related to a separate subject than what the bill currently covers, namely retention requirements for paper filings with filing officers. The amendments allow a filing filed on paper to be immediately retained on microfilm or other space-saving materials or as an electronic copy, instead of the filing officer having to retain the filing first on paper for 2 years. So it allows immediate electronic retention instead of having to keep it on paper. Second, the amendments expands the time extension for returning, donating, or making reimbursement for all gifts, not just gifts for invitation-only events, to within 30 days after the end of the calendar quarter in which the gift was received. The previous iteration of the bill only applied to gifts of admission to invitation-only events. The amendments expand the bill to all gifts. Under current law, if a gift is returned, donated, or the official pays reimbursement for the gift within 30 days of receipt, the gift might be considered a, quote, gift under the Act, and thus would not be reportable, or if the gift exceeded the applicable limit, they could pay the gift down to under the limit within 30 days of receipt. This bill would now change that threshold for all gifts to 30 days after the end of the calendar quarter in which the gift was received. So this would give a public official, depending on when the gift was received in the quarter, between 1 and 4 months to donate, return, or make reimbursement for the gift. The FCPC's costs for this bill are minor. Staff is recommending a support if amended position. Specifically, staff would recommend support if the bill was amended to delete the changes relating to extending the time for donating, returning, or making reimbursement for a gift. Officials currently have 30 days to decide what to do with the gift. Staff thinks this is sufficient, and I've heard members of the commission express similar sentiments at past meetings. We think the remaining provisions are good policy, and the author's office has previously taken our suggested technical amendments relating to electronic filing for SEIs. I'll now turn to the committee for any discussion on the amendments or anything else.
I certainly want to hear from my colleague about that. I support what you're saying, the recommended amendment. I do think the current status quo on 30 days is appropriate. I think that's how I felt last year when there was a similar version of this bill. I'm very much supportive of the e-filing part because I think that is a good step forward. Can you say a little bit about, if you know, the author's rationale for that and the changing it to the each quarter calendar, which is quite further down the road, and why a support if amended versus oppose and less amended? You know, again, this is a bit for the public, but I think it's also, there's a distinction in what it might accomplish. I think I would lean more towards a support if amended, or frankly wait to see if they're going to make the amendments at all and then come in with strong support and not be in between. But I think it's helpful to know the difference between the two.
So I think the first question had to do with where the time extension came from.
Or how the author, if they've expressed how they came to that particular time frame for this year, since it is quite an extension of time for recipients of gifts to make an adjustment.
My understanding is that for some folks who do give gifts to public officials, their reporting doesn't happen until the end of the calendar quarter, so they might not have those figures available to provide the official as to how much the event cost or things of that nature. So giving them 30 days after that would allow them to have the time after they report, after the end of the quarter, and then 30 days after that to decide what to do with the gift.
And then the support if amended versus oppose and less amended, how you came down on that recommendation?
I think staff feels strongly in support of the SEI, e-filing for SEI's position, so that's mostly where the support position came from. We would like to see that move forward, and the thing that's holding us back from a pure support position is the gift provision. Yeah,
I can understand that. And I think that's where I'm at on this, as opposed to an opposed position, which is a little bit more hostile, or perhaps where you don't feel strongly enough about another part of the legislation. But if this comes to a point where it isn't amended in the final version, I would want us to have an opportunity to change and make sure it's publicly known where we're at, which is either remove any support or potentially oppose. We have to be nimble about that, and you're very good at helping us do that. That would be how I would foresee it. I'm very interested in the chair's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have similar concerns about the portions of the bill that change the timing on gifts. And it strikes me that I think I understand the author's concern that from the official standpoint, 30 days for them to decide what to do with a gift starts ticking before they may get the information from the person who's providing the gift, right? The lobbyist, the lobbying firm, et cetera. It does seem to me that perhaps one way of addressing that they could consider is expediting the time in which the lobbyist firm has to provide that information to the public official. So in here, what they're doing is they're doing two things. It seems to me is they're giving the lobbying firms more time, I think. Well, they're shortening that, but then they're giving the public official more time on the back end. It seems to me that I don't understand as a matter of policy why we have to wait till the end of each calendar quarter in which the gift was provided before the person giving the gift communicates the value of that gift. If it were me, I would impose an obligation on the lobbyist or lobbying firm to provide notice of the value of that within 15 days, let's just say, of providing the gift. And then, if the public official has concerns that they're not getting that information timely, extend their time to 45 days. So 15 days to provide it, and then they get 45 days, so they really get 30 days to decide what to do with the gift. It seems to me that that's a more sensible way of addressing the concern that the author has, or at least a different way to alleviate some of our concerns. So it's a long way of saying I think there is some room to find the approach they've taken on that portion of the bill, but I agree with the electronic filing. That is so I think the support, if amended, position today makes sense, and if we can communicate our views on the second author's office. Now, and then, as Commissioner Baker suggested, if in final form continues on this path with the gifts, then we can just take it at that time and decide whether.
I agree. One question I have is, has the author requested our position at this point, an official position?
No, I have not received a request.
So I suppose one option is, and maybe you've already done this, is approach them and say, if you can move this, we can do a letter of support. And because that may be one as well, where we're not even in that support if amended, maybe have to change it down the road, but go forward in that way. Can you tell me if that's already happened in conversation, and if that might be an alternative step? It's not a big alternative step, but it could even happen before our commission meeting next week, potentially. I doubt it, but they're changing it, not you. What are your thoughts on that?
In earlier conversations with the author's office, probably towards the end of last year on this bill, they were not open to removing that portion entirely. I had expressed that the commission had concerns about it at the time. As for if there was an alternative solution, we haven't discussed that idea with them. So that's something that I can bring to them as an idea.
I think I would be more inclined to visit with them before even next week's commission meeting and potentially look at the support if amended then. You never know. I doubt they would change. We're still not early in the legislative calendar year. I can go either way, and if we take that position now or later. But I know that having it now without approaching them and saying, hey, can you are you game for completely removing it this year, may not have a change. I welcome your thoughts again, Chair.
I think that's a sensible way of approaching it. So why don't we, I think the recommendation from the committee is that we take no action one way or the other on supporting or opposing the bill at this point, but instead we're directing our legislative counsel to communicate to the author's office our concerns about the time frame on the gifts and dialogue with alternative solutions to the problem which is a real problem. I don't want to give that short shrift. I think she's right. I think there is a sort of disconnect in the law. I just think there's a different.
Okay, if there's no more discussion on that bill, I will move to the next. It is AB 1783 by Assemblymember Levine, relating to expanding the definition of administrative action for purposes of determining what is considered lobbying under the Act. At the Assembly Elections Committee hearing, I was able to get more background on this bill, and the author confirmed that this bill did arise from the issue highlighted in the SAC-B article relating to contingent fees for securing certain kinds of contracts. The bill is narrow and applies to approvals of mergers and acquisitions of certain healthcare service plans and domestic insurers. The FTPC's costs for the bill are minor, and staff is recommending a support position, and this is based on previous comments on this issue from the Commission. Any discussion on this bill?
I think certainly like this version of the bill better than some prior versions, which I think, at least to me, suggested that they may encompass all quasi-judicial proceedings around the state. I think that's taking it too far. So this seems narrowly tailored to address the problem that recently, I think, a support position.
I agree. My initial reaction when I read your report originally was, gosh, that's too narrow. There will be other areas, but that doesn't mean that can either happen down the road or otherwise. Not a reason to oppose this. I would encourage in the future to maybe look at other areas or the legislature where it might be appropriate. We can even come up with some, but I would support this.
I'll move on to the next bill. It is AB 1819 by Assemblymember Lee. This is relating to prohibiting contributions from foreign influenced business entities. The FPPC has costs for this bill. It will need 3 new positions, 2 in enforcement and 1 in legal. Staff recommends a neutral or no position for this bill.
I just ask, what is the rationale for the neutral no position?
There is some question about whether there may be some First Amendment concerns with whether this is sufficiently narrowly tailored. So based on those constitutional concerns, we don't recommend support at this time.
There could also be additional reasons why there may be some issues. Having not seen this and looked for the specific language, I don't think it's appropriate either for us to take a position at this.
No position at this time.
The next bill is AB 2158 by Assemblymember Mike Fong. This bill requires members of the governing boards of school districts, county offices of education, and charter schools to take the local agency ethics training. The FPPC will require 1 new IT position. IT staff respond to hundreds of requests for technical assistance every week relating to the online local agency ethics training program. And this bill would add over 2,000 agencies to those that must complete the ethics training. So staff is recommending a support position for this bill.
Workload will increase substantially if the bill does become law, but I think it's a position, and I
Agreed, I do as well. As we've seen in our time, my time, and I think I could probably say yours as well, there's sometimes at the local level, there's really needs to be more training and make sure that it's there. Especially, you know, I don't want to say this is early necessarily in someone's public service career at the very most local level, how important that is to do. So I would support this. I have a residual memory that charter entities, as governed under the Corporations Code, have other ethics rules that may apply to them, or boards of directors and conflict of interest rules that apply to them, but this is about training. And I don't want to derail or get distracted by what other rules they may have. It doesn't sound like this bill is attempting to change that. And so I think I got past whatever potential nerves I might have about it, because it's not changing those rules, it's training. So I think this would be an appropriate one to support and recommend the commission do it.
Thank you. The next is AB 2528 by Assemblymember Bigelow. This bill requires local candidates and officers with campaign contributions of $15,000 or more to file their campaign statements electronically with the SOS, in addition to with whoever they are currently filing with. Recent amendments require SOS to submit a report to the legislature after CARS is certified, detailing what changes must be made to CARS so that it can accept these local filings. SOS would be required to consult with the FPPC and the Department of Technology in preparing that report. The duty to file with SOS would not be triggered until after CARS is certified and after the necessary changes to the system have been made to allow acceptance of local filings. FPPC's costs for this are minor, and staff is recommending support.
Well, I think again, sort of I see as the main right to me that we should have a one-stop shop for being able to access these types of filings. And I think this version of the bill requiring collaboration with the FPPC folks, timeline being after CARS certification policy, and something that we're
Yeah, I completely.
Okay. The next is SB 1352. This is by Senator Allen. The bill reduces the threshold for campaign reporting during the time period before the 90-day pre-election period in order to have faster reporting of lower amounts during this period. The FPPC would require 1 new position in enforcement, and staff is recommending a support position.
And I think this is it strikes me that we're improving the degree of transparency with campaign activity shortly before an election, and so this value to the public. I'm comfortable with this.
Thank you. Can you refresh my memory on existing law? That's out there, so it's highlighted what we're changing here. What the bill would change.
I can. So the current law requires, during the period before the 90-day pre-election period, that contributions of $5,000 or more are reported within 10 business days of receipt. And this bill would change that to contributions of $2,500 or more would have to be reported within 5 business days of receipt. So it cuts both of those thresholds in half.
To quibble on particulars, I do have an issue with the 5 days versus 10, because that's going to already, by lowering the threshold amount, I like the principle behind this, and the transparency is important, but that could potentially trigger much more. If the maximum contribution, the $5,000 amount is just above what is a current maximum contribution. So if someone makes a maximum contribution to someone in a primary, they're going to fall below that amount, if I'm thinking of this correctly. The committee doesn't have to report that yet. This is going to really dramatically, potentially improve transparency fast, but a lot more work on the part of a treasurer campaign. And I think my suggestion, I'd be personally interested in seeing it stick to the 10 days, just to have that time frame. I don't feel so strongly about it that we wouldn't do a position. Again, I welcome the thoughts of the chair on this, because I do think there is going to potentially be many more transactions that will be reported on top of in less time.
Are there any opposition letters? Has anybody expressed concerns that this would not be practical from the standpoint of?
As of the committee hearing, I only have support and opposition letters from that period. But as of then, there's no record of registered opposition. There is a sponsor, but no opposition.
I think you're right. I think we're going to get more activity reported sooner, which again, I think from my standpoint, that's good for the public. I do think that, kind of thinking into the future, ours is supposed to be a data-driven application, which should make it easier for campaigns to transfer that information. It's moving almost entirely electronic at that point. So I'm confident that campaigns.
Thank you. I see that on the horizon. The horizon's gotten farther and farther away, as we've understood it most recently. I do think of, and I know many of us here, I'm sure all the commissioners do as well, that that first-time candidate who's already dealing with a lot of compliance-related points, and what happens when you miss these, even if it's by a day or two, that you've suddenly gotten into violation territory potentially. I would be inclined to keep the time frame. I don't feel strongly about it. I don't know if the author has any appetite for that. If the chair would be interested in just seeing if they're comfortable with looking at that, and maybe next week we can address if they're like, nope, don't want to bother. But if they don't have a problem with it, I would feel more comfortable with that. I think it would be a time frame that's consistent with what is practiced now. What are your thoughts on that?
I think sooner is better.
Better, okay.
I do, and here's the thing: is I think not that what you're saying is. It's just the folks who have the most potentially, I won't say to lose, but whose workload would increase, have not deemed fit to take an opposed position. They haven't done it, and it's, from our standpoint, I think we should be most concerned with improving transparency. And if the folks whose job it is to fill in the information and file the reports don't think this is so significant that they've registered any opposition to it, then I'm loath.
I can understand that. I mean, it's also going to give them more work, which is always, I don't think that makes them nefarious or a disincentive to weigh in. This current iteration of the bill, about how long has that been out and available for comment? I'm looking at on April 27th when it passed out of Elections Committee.
I can check that right now. The amendments were April 6th.
Yeah, they've had some time to work on it. I get your point.
But we don't have to
Yeah.
take a position on this. We can.
It looks like it's set for hearing, what is today? Yesterday. Tonight. I'm having a little time from travel in approps. So that's already happened.
Yes, it's on suspense.
It's on suspense. Okay. I would be game. That's just my thoughts on that 5-day, 10-day. And I'm less, I always welcome hearing from the community that most respond to this. They're gonna have more work. Treasurer's gonna have more work, and the folks who help them with compliance will have work. I'm thinking a bit of the campaign. I definitely want that information. I have no problem with the threshold change, but that 5 to 10 day in the hustle and bustle of campaigns is just something I'm thinking of. I'm not gonna get in the way of more transparency if that's where it lands. I'd just like to see us pursue that briefly. That would be my encouragement.
Why don't we, excuse me, why don't we not, as a committee, take a position, staff's recommendation today, and instead, let's.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's great.
All right.
The next is SB 1360 by Senator Umberg. This bill makes several changes to the disclosure requirements for campaign ads and makes changes in the elections code relating to the initiative, referendum, and recall processes. FPPC would require 1 new position in enforcement, and staff is recommending a support positions just for the provisions amending the PRA, and a neutral/no position for the provisions amending the elections code.
Processing this one a little bit. While I do that, I welcome your thoughts. In taking a position only on certain provisions, when that gets listed by authors, it's rare that I see it listed as support in part. They're just going to list us as support, and we may not want to convolute that a little bit. What are your thoughts?
I support, as a matter of policy, the changes that they're making to the act on the common sense, good proposed changes. So I certainly support those. I think when you have a vehicle that intermixes changes to the Political Reform Act and to the Elections Code, I do think it's important that in some way that we make very clear that we are only opining on PRA-related changes, and we should stay in our lane and speak to election code changes that we don't interpret, administer, or enforce at this agency. So whether it is a pure support position, and then the support letter just makes clear we're really only talking about the PRA versus combination support, neutral, agnostic on how we communicate that, but that's philosophically where I come down. I'd like us to register some support for Reform Act changes, and I want us to be careful and not take a position on election code changes that are outside of our jurisdiction.
Thank you. Agreed. 2 questions, Ms. Nakano, if I may. One is it possible, or have you seen a way to work out with an author? Look, when you list us, it's got to be clear on the PRA provisions only, including in all their various representations of who supports it. And we got to just be diligent about that, because the committee or someone else may note FPPC support. We want to be clear. And the second is, are you able to just give a very bird's eye view on what the elections code ones are that we would be in the same bill as?
From my recollection, and I haven't looked at them very closely recently, I think it's similar. They're changing some disclosure requirements, but at the moment, I'm not sure more specifics.
And I can look into that as well and follow up with you offline just to understand what we're in the same room as in legislation. I don't want to be blind to whatever that may be. On to the first question, do you think there might be a way to protect the representation of what the FPPC supports if we were to take a support of a section on this bill?
I can check in with the consultants in the elections committees and see how they would normally approach that in their analyses, and also make clear to the author's office if we moved forward with a support position, it would only be for a portion of the bill, and get some more clarification on how they would indicate that in their fact sheet and other materials. We would also indicate in our support letter, if we choose to have one, that it's only for certain portions. And then for my public testimony at any upcoming committee hearings, I would make clear that our support is only for that particular portion.
Mhm. I think I'm all right with that. I haven't seen it done before. And given, it's been some of these, when I see initiative, referendum, and recall petitions, there could be something hot in there. I'm sure if there were, you'd probably be remembering it pretty clearly. And I just want to know what we're going to be in the room in, which might just be a little more homework on my part. This might be one that I might hold off until next week so we can see and just make sure we know what we're getting in. I think I'm probably going to take a look at the bill as well and understand the actual text of the bill on what are the penalties for these. That would be my inclination.
So I'm fortunate in the sense that Ms. Linker provides me with copies of all the different bills that are in Ms. Nakano's report. And so I actually have SB 1360. And while I haven't read the text, I will just, for the record, say that Ledge Council's digest with respect to initiative, referendum, and recall petitions says that the bill would require an initiative, referendum, or recall petition to instruct voters to sign the petition only after viewing certain disclosures regarding the top contributors to the initiative, referendum, or recall as specified. The bill would make additional changes to initiative, referendum, or recall. So, with respect to the former, the idea that potential signers would be to only sign after reviewing the disclosures on the top contributors. As a matter of policy, personally, I certainly think that's a good thing. I think people should be doing that. But again, institutionally, because that requirement relates to the form and validity of a petition that we do not have any jurisdiction to enforce, that's the institutional. Even though I may personally think it's good policy, I'm reluctant to have our agency weigh in on it.
Thank you. Good work by Ms. Linker for having that thoroughly prepared. I can be supportive of this effort. I am nervous about, I'm a little surprised why this isn't a single subject bill issue, why there may not be a problem with that to begin with, but I'm not looking for problems. Some opponent can come forward with that if they wanted. I would support this letter if we can. I'd like to hear from you after speaking with the committee consultants in the author's office, how they would make it clear that we're taking no position, and I would not want any of the representations of our support to be the least bit vague about that, and that could make it cumbersome on their part.
So why don't we hold taking a formal position on this bill until you can report back to the full commission on your conversations with committee staff on how we kind of bifurcate our views on this particular.
Okay, thank you. Last bill is SB 1439, but this is by Senator Glazer, relating to applying the disqualification provisions to directly elected members of local government agencies. This bill will require 3 new positions, 2 in enforcement, 1 in legal, and staff is recommending support.
Right. Well, on this one, I will say I appreciate Senator Glazer bringing this bill floor. I think that the policy change here is a good one. I'd like to support that. I again recognize it's a lot more work for our agency, but I think it is the right thing to do. My view is we ought to.
I agree. Make that recommendation for us to do with the full commission.
All right. All right, Ms. Nakano, I think that is all of the non-commission sponsored bill positions. Let me just go through my notes. I think for the record, starting with AB 975, we are taking no action on that bill at this time. With respect to AB 1783, we are recommending that the full commission accept staff's recommendation of support on that bill. On AB 1819, We are not taking a position at this time, and that is the recommendation that'll be communicated to the full commission. AB 2158, we are accepting and recommending staff's recommended support position to the full commission on that bill. AB 2528, we are also recommending the full commission accept staff's recommended support position on that bill. 1352, we are holding consideration of what position to take pending the full commission having the opportunity to weigh in. Also holding, taking a position on SB 1360 until the full commission. We are accepting staff's recommendation to the full commission to support SB 1430. Commissioner Baker, that was all right?
Agreed. Good notes.
All right. Very good. Ms. Nakano, anything further for us?
No, that's all I have today.
All right. Commissioner Baker, any additional questions or comments for Ms. Nakano?
No, thank you for the report and recommendations.
Thank you.
See you next week. All right. Any public comment on item 3 before we move on? Hearing and seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Nakano. Item 4, our final item, items for our June committee meeting. I know, Ms. Nakano, you're going to be back with us in June. Baker, anything additional you'd like to see back before us in June?
I don't know if June would be too early, but we may get, and this could just be coming to the full commission. I know sometime in mid-June, a budget will have been signed, and there'll be a May revise, and I'm always kind of curious how our agency is affected, especially as we're looking at these bills and the trends that have happened over time. So maybe an update on where discussions are with respect to what our budget either is or will be, and any requests that we have in that area. I think
that's something that Ms. Hahn will brief the full commission on in June, because you're right, by that point she should believe had sufficient time. All right, anything further then?
No, thank you.
All right, I will make a move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Chair Maddox?
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.